What's happening, fishing friends? Welcome to another episode. Today should be a fun one because I was going through all these old Monster Bass boxes that I had. They still had a lot of stuff in them, and I came up with 5 different rigs, 10 tips total. So if you carry the one, do the math. 2 tips for each rig, and this is for anybody. I've got some things that'll help beginners. I've got some things that I've even had to refresh myself on and remind myself, if you fish these rigs for a long time, sometimes you kind of get complacent or forget there's other ways to do it. So 10 different tips with these rigs that I think will help anybody. I don't care who you are. But I'm not going to do that here. We're going to take an up close look over on my desk. So enough yapping, let's take a look. All right, so the first rig we're going to start with is the Ned rig. Now, everybody fishes these, right? And there's really not a wrong way to fish it, but there's a couple things that have helped me be more successful with this rig overall. Number one, this is a freebie. This is not one of the tips, but using an EWG hook if you're a bank angler. You know, the normal Ned rig hooks have just this little wire thing here. You do that, and most of those are weedless. Now, they have all different types. These are like the power weedless deal. Z-Man has these little Ned locks, again, open hook. But as a bank angler, I've got snagged a lot less with these. Now, as you'll notice, this is a pretty heavy head. This is a 1/4 ounce. This is for when I was fishing the river when you've got a lot of current, or sometimes if it's really windy, it can be hard to throw one of these little guys. This is the Ned lock EWG that Z-Man makes. 1/15 ounce, so pretty light, hard to throw if you've got a lot of current. So I will step up, but in any other circumstance, if I can get away with it, I want to go with as light of a Ned rig head as I can get away with. Now, again, that's going to depend, on wind, current, because sometimes if you're throwing this light of a jig out there and you can't feel it, you're not doing it right. You've got to be able to feel your lure on the end of that. And that could also be in your combo. If you're trying to throw this on 15-pound fluorocarbon, you're probably not going to feel it. So, a 10-pound braid to like an 8-pound or 6-pound leader with something real light like this is a perfect way to fish it. But again, if you notice they're only hitting it on the bottom when you're, kind of hopping it and bouncing it along there's no problem going up to something like this. This is a 3/16. As long as you're not getting snagged all the time, going up to something like this when you can feel the bottom. But as a general rule, I will try to go with as light of a jig head as I can to get away with. Now, for the second tip, I hear a lot of people say, oh, I don't want to sit around, it's so boring, just dead sticking a little Ned rig, it's dumb. Well, if you notice, this is the Sabertooth EWG Ned rig head that Monster Bass makes. It's got this vertical line tie, right? So when you drop it down, it's got this, they call it like the mushroom head or whatever. It's supposed to sit like this, right? So as it floats, it sits up like this. And that's kind of what the whole point of it is, as you're bouncing it. But these can be fished so many different ways. This is a jig head just like anything else. And really the old, if you look at Ned Katie, the way the Ned rig was fished with like a swim and pop is not just sitting around and Ned sticking it, right? You're throwing it out. He would kind of let it drop and shake it on the way down. Then you can kind of swim it before it even hits the bottom. You can bounce it, swim it. There's a number of different ways you can fish this. I have had a lot of luck bouncing this, swimming it, and I need to do a better job of shaking my rod tip, when I swim it to put a little action in this, because most Ned rig baits, now they're coming out with a ton more, but most Ned rig baits like this is the big TRD from Z-Man, are just this, simple kind of stick looking bait, nothing too fancy to it. So as you're moving your rod tip and bouncing it as you're swimming it, you're imparting action on this lure. So don't be afraid to mess with your retrieves. Throw it out, swim it, and pop it on the way back. You can kind of yo-yo it on the way back, bounce it on the bottom. You can kind of rip it up off the bottom if they're really hitting it on the fall and letting it fall in front of them. A number of different ways you can fish this. Don't let people tell you that the only way you fish a Ned rig is to sit around and dead stick it and be boring. Okay, the second rig to talk about is the Texas rig. Now, I found this in one of my Monster Bass boxes. They have these little like kits where you get the tungsten, the bobber stops, and little clackers. Let's rig one up here. And with all these rigs, like I said, I got this all from Monster Bass. I will leave my link below. They were kind enough to give a 25% off. So if you have any lures or anything you want to get over there, I don't think it works for the subscriptions. But anything in the store, lures and such, you can get 25% off, and I will leave their website and my code linked below. So thanks to Monster Bass for that. Now for the plastic, I'm going to grab one of these. This is one of the X-Zone True Center sticks, little 5-inch stick bait. Pretty cool color. I like this, the watermelon candy, kind of like a sprayed grass. Some good sticky sharp mustad hooks. I run the point down just to the bend, push it up and around, turn it over, mark where that hook needs to go through. And just like that, you've got a nice little weedless Texas rig. Now, my 2 tips for fishing a Texas rig like this. Number 1 is get where other people won't. I say this so many times, and I feel like a lot of people just get complacent with throwing this around. They'll go to a piece of wood. Oh man, that looks really good. They'll throw to the front of it, maybe throw to the sides of it and be like, oh gosh, it looks so good there. I would have thought a fish would have ate this. Well, if you're fishing a laydown or something where it's really brushy, get back into that gnarly stuff. Get back to all the dark spots where it's thicker. Get into the thick and dirty, oftentimes, even if somebody came by before you and, threw one to the edge and there was a fish sitting there, there's a good chance that therethe's a couple more fish sitting on that lay down, back in the dirty, gnarly, thick stuff. That kind of brings me to my second point. So number one for a Texas rig is get where other people won't. And kind of a free tip, if it looks really fishy, spend just a little bit more time there. Throw a few more pitches to it. I've had actually a time when I caught one of my biggest bass. It was like a almost 6-pounder. I threw to a brush pile probably 10, 15 times. I'm like, there has got to be a fish here before I finally caught it. Now, it's not going to be that way on every brush pile, but if it looks really fishy, you've got confidence there, throw a few more times. So number two is people ask all the time about pegged versus a not pegged weight. And you can see here, I've got my tungsten on there and I've got that little bobber stop. This is what you call pegged. So if I'm in really brushy, thick stuff, this is a perfect way to do it with a straight worm like this, something that doesn't have a bunch of appendages to get caught in that brush. So when you drop it through, all these little fingery things, it doesn't matter. It'll slide right through there because the weight's connected right through it, just like a dart. Now, most of the time, if I can get away with it, I go with my weight not pegged. So I wouldn't have this peg on here. I would take it off. You throw the lure out there, especially with a plastic that has a lot of movement on it. You throw the lure out there, it'll go down your line, then your plastic will kind of fall down after it, a lot more natural looking. So if I'm around big pieces of wood that I don't think I'm going to get this all twisted around, on grass lines and stuff, anywhere where it's not super crazy thick, I go with this not pegged. So for me, those are the differences. It's really going to be the cover. If I'm in thick grass, punching, which I don't do a ton of, but thicker grass, real thick brush, I flip to that a lot. I'll peg it, so it's like that. Otherwise, if I can get away with it, I go with it not pegged because I think it looks a lot more natural going down. Even with something like this, it'll kind of kick and float and flutter down behind that weight as it gets down to it. All right, next up, we've got the Tokyo rig. Kind of a newer rig to me. There's like the Jika rig, whatever they called it, that is similar to this. But this is like a little drop shot deal with a wire on it. So it's like kind of a little power finessey drop shot deal. Really, people like to use this, I know, for punching. People like to throw this, in and around grass. And there's a couple different ways to rig your weight. So that's the first tip. I see everybody like online rigging it with the point down. So that would be like if you're throwing this in and around grass, in and around stuff with the point down. So imagine this weight pointing down this way with the head of it. It's going to go right through grass. It's going to punch through that. It's going to go through there really easy and you can pull it out. Great way to do that. And I like that. But one thing that I have done with this is kind of drag this on the bottom, hopped it around some larger rocks, and for that, I like to point the nose of this weight up. So that way, as you're dragging this on the bottom, that point, the nose of this weight, the kind of the cone is pointing forward. So you can drag this over rocks. It comes through stuff a little bit easier, I've noticed. So that's the first tip is you've got a couple different ways you can put your weight on here. Nose up when you're dragging it, nose down when you're, throwing and pitching and flipping around wood and grass, that kind of stuff. The second tip is curling the wire. Now, I wish I could take credit for this. I cannot. This was, I think, an Instagram thing or something that Jacob Wheeler shared that helped me a ton. Now, what I see normally is people with this wire is they'll bend it up and around the outside of the weight, right? So they'll just take this wire, put it out here so it's kind of sticking on the outside. And as I was dragging this on the bottom, I was always getting algae and grass and all kinds of stuff caught in this wire on the outside of it. So Wheeler showed this awesome tip. He takes his pliers. I just take my needle nose pliers, that I use to get the hooks out of the fish mouth. I take those needle nose pliers, just grab by the tip of the wire there and just take it and turn it, twist it down into the bottom into a circle. And it doesn't matter if you've got your weight pointed down. So just like that, weight pointed down or weight pointed up, it doesn't matter. When you put that ring on there and bend it into a little circle down there, it comes through stuff a lot better. So even if you're punching through grass like this comes right through, your weight follows it. Or like on this rig, you bend it around down under the weight. The weight kind of hides it back there as you're dragging it through stuff and you don't get caught. So give that a try if you're still somewhat new to the Tokyo rig, or even if you fished it and never tried it, give it a try. That has helped a lot for me. Okay, next up, again, one of my favorites, especially a couple years ago, I feel like I could go anywhere and catch fish on a wacky rig. So that's the next one we've got here, the wacky rig. And a few boxes ago, Monster Bass gave you the wacky tool, which you can never have enough of these because for whatever reason, I seem to always lose them. And they put the nice Mustad O-rings on here that have the little ring that splits out the side for your wacky rigs. So you just pull one of these down, roll it down to the tip there, take your stick bait, put it in here. Now the cool thing about X-Zone is they call this the true center because there's a rib right there in the exact middle of it. So you know right where to put your O-ring. like that, and you can see it's right in the middle of your soft plastic. I got some of these hooks, Mustad little wacky Nico hooks, and I like these because they have like a little bend at the bottom where your O-ring or your plastic tends to sit, you know, when you're Nico rigging it, or like the wacky rig like this. So take your hook, put it through that little other smaller rubber ring, and it's got it perpendicular to your bait just like that, which is how I like to rig it. So when a fish comes up and bites it, it's right there in the roof of the mouth for a perfect hook set. So the 2 tips for this wacky rig though, number 1 is stop doing so much, folks. I see people throwing the wacky rig, even, you know, people on Instagram and stuff, and I'm not saying there's like a right or wrong way to fish it, but oftentimes when I hear people say I've never caught anything on a wacky rig, one thing people do is just too much. The awesome part about a wacky rig is it's a do-nothing rig. So you throw it out, let it fall on slack line. Just let it fall. Don't touch it. So you don't want it to be doing this and then like go all crazy because you're messing with your line. Throw it down, and it's this like little undulating action as this falls all the way to the bottom, right? You can let it sit there for a second. You can kind of pop it on the bottom. Then I'll give it a 2 or 3 twitches so it goes tweet, 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 like that, and then it just falls down and shakes again. Do nothing with it. It's, you know, one of those that I kind of target fish. It can be kind of hard to cover a lot of water with it, but you know, if I've got a good grass line, if I've got like a little wood pile I can throw the outside of, something like this is perfect for those specific little targets. Now the second part of that, stop doing nothing, is kind of ties into line watching. As your bait is going down, I always fished on a spinning rig, like 10 to maybe up to 15 pound braid, but usually like 10, 12 pound braid to an 8 pound, 10 pound fluorocarbon leader. Throw it out, and as it's sinking, watch your line. So for me, it's that braided main line. I'll have a bright color I'm watching it, because if you see your line starting to go to the side, you've got a fish. Reel down into it. Once you feel some weight, just kind of pull into that fish. These hooks are so light, you don't have to jack them like you would with a jig, a Texas rig, nothing like that. You just pull into it, and they are super sharp, little thin hooks that pierce through without much pressure. So the 2 tips, number 1, stop doing so much. I recommend going braid to a leader because you can see that line. And again, tip 2, I think that line does matter because you can watch it as you get a bite, or it helps with sensitivity and taking out some of that stretch when you set the hook. Okay, the last rig that we've got is the Nico or the Neko rig. So instead of the wacky rig with the O-ring being in the middle like that, you can leave that little rubber ball on there. I'm just going to snip it off. And I'm going to take and slide that O-ring down so there's maybe 1/4 to 1/3 down here, and then 2/3-ish of the lure like this. And this is going to be the top of the lure that's giving it all the action. So I want to have more tail side, more top side as I'm hopping this. I'm going to need a Nico or a Neko weight. I think Neko is the correct pronunciation. These are some 1/16 ounce. These are tungsten, which is really nice because they're so small. Grab one of these, and if you wanted a little less weight, you could always take your pliers and cut some of that off, but I think a 1/16 is a good start. Take the weight, push that down into the nose. I like to leave just a little bit of it sticking out, so that way when I bounce this over rocks and stuff, you can feel that, you know, like ping and tick on those hard surfaces. I'm going to take my hook, and this is the first tip for the Neko rig, is to put your hook in and under that so the hook point is up. So as I'm working this on the bottom, this weight's going to be down here. I'm hopping it, popping it. This is doing its, you know, stuff back here, and this hook point is up. So again, that way if the fish grabs it from the side, if it grabs it from the top, that hook is up. I'm going to penetrate the top of the roof of the mouth, which is what I want. You don't want to have your hook point pointed down. So a couple things that's going to do. One, it's going to shelter the top of the mouth. They might get the bottom or a side maybe, but as they bite the top of that, you've got it there. And as you're bouncing this on the bottom and dragging it through stuff, that's just going to be like a shovel grabbing stuff. You're going to get snagged a lot more. So put the point up, away from the weight, pointing up towards the top of the water. Second tip with the Neko rig is semi-slack line. So the key to the Neko rig is if you throw it out and let it stay on slack line, you've got a whole bunch of line out in front of it, it's going to fall over. Okay, and that's a good chance that you're going to get snagged and stuff, like the carpet stuff here. So as you throw this down, you want to kind of have semi-slack line. You don't want to have so much that you're pulling it towards you as you cast it out there. Cast it out, watch your line, and kind of keep it tight. So it should just be kind of bowed, your line going down toward the water. That way you keep this kind of up like so. It helps if you have a floating plastic. It's because it's going to tend to sit up like this a little bit off the bottom. And then you can just bounce it. You can, you know, kind of bounce it and drag it, keeping bottom contact like that. You can work this like a wacky rig. So after it gets down to the bottom, you can pop, pop, pop. And then it's going to fall down like this. Pop, pop, pop. You're going to get that wacky rig popping action. Then it's going to sit down like that. So The big thing with that is watch your line and keep it semi-slack. You don't want to just throw this out, pop it, and then keep going slack line, or that hook's going to fall over on the bottom and you get snagged. All right, fisher friends, comment below and let me know, is there one of those tips that you're kind of like, yeah, you know what, I forgot about that, thanks for the reminder? Or is there a tip for one of those rigs that you think will help a bunch of other people? One cool thing that I love about my fishing community here on Debos Fishing is people are always talking, commenting below, especially on the lives. There's always chat and stuff going on, people giving recommendations. Again, I don't know everything. I'm just a guy who likes to fish, so one of you all out there might have an even better tip than I gave here, so please leave that below. Now, today's subscribe fisher friend is my guy, Lil Tommy. You did win a giveaway on a live. I've still got to get that out to you, my friend, so I'm sorry. That'll be going out soon, and thank you for everybody else, all the members who support me, people who watch on the lives. If you like, subscribe, comment, doing all those things. It's free. It helps me a ton, and I appreciate the heck out of you all. So that's enough for me. Thanks for Monster Bass for sending over some boxes and using some cool rigs here in front of the camera. Hope y'all liked it, but it's enough for me. Thank you all for watching, and until next time.